On behalf of Deshkal Society and IGNCA, I warmly welcome Dr. Shovana Narayan with us. She is a name synonymous with Kathak, is the celebrated outstanding doyen of this art form, breathing the spirit and ethos of Indian spirituality, classicism, and artistic excellence. For her outstanding, consistent, and trend-setting pioneering works in Kathak, she has been awarded the prestigious Padma Shri Award by the President of India in 1992 and the Sangeet Natak Academy Award for 1999 to 2000 in 2001. She is a recipient of very, very prestigious awards, and she's a guru, multifaceted personality, a pioneer, and she has left and is leaving her indelible imprint as a performer, choreographer, researcher, organizer, and author. She is deeply entrenched in Hindi and Sanskrit literature, Hindu philosophy, and her performances have been marked with the depth of emotion along with the vivaciousness imparted by the rhythmic brilliance. She has authored more than 15 books and articles, including for INTAC, UNESCO, and such other prestigious organizations. And all these are very well researched writings. So it's an honor to be interacting with her, and we welcome you here.
Thank you so much indeed.
As we are holding this third edition of the Bodh Gaya dialogues, I think the conversation has to be centered around and encompassing the life and philosophy of Gautam Buddha, as well as his connection with the Bodh Gaya.
Well, for me, I've always been fascinated with Lord Buddha. Not from yesterday, not from today, but from yesteryears. And it started rather early, I would say. And perhaps it was because of the atmosphere at home that one was always reading and one was always into literature and philosophy. Also the fact that somewhere in my mother's house, which is Nanihal, it is close to Vaishali because it's in Muzaffarpur. So you heard of Vaishali, you started talking about the significance of Vaishali, and therefore, I think since childhood, that whole connectivity of Vaishali, Buddha, and then there was this discussion about how this person who was born into a Rajgharana, who was a prince, and yet forsook everything and went out. And then his connection with Bodh Gaya, and which is also very significant, extremely significant. And particularly I, as a dancer, as an artist, I find it very significant that moment of realization. Because you see, when you're reading a lot of texts on, like in all spiritual texts pertaining to any ism, there are discussions, there are commentaries, there are some which are supposed to be original, but actually it is how that person has perceived to see and hear it and has written it down. And therefore, then it gets translated further, it gets added, subtracted, something is lost, something is added. So that is happening. But somewhere when you started reading all the literature and you started interacting with people, then you saw how beautifully, and I being a dancer and an artist, I find how beautifully everything gelled and resonated with what, I was reading and living. For example, Bodh Gaya. Now he had been meditating for a long time. अब आप हमेशा नाम उनके नाम के साथ you're hearing Sujata का नाम, you're hearing आम्रपाली का नाम, वैशाली है तो आम्रपाली का नाम, तो अब तो फिर इनफैक्ट जब मैं हंस के कहती हूँ ऑन अ लाइटर नोट, डाइग्रेसिंग फ्रॉम द मेन, कि जब कहती अरे आप बिहार की हैं और आप बुद्ध कर रही हैं और आप डांस करती हैं, तो मैंने कहा क्यों नहीं भाई the famous dancers all came from Vaishali and from around Magadh area and from other
so
area.
true.
And secondly, about the strength, the inner strength of Amrapali. How she could also forsake. In a way, she was different. She had a different profession, different life. But yet, in some ways, the two were similar. Because here was Bodh, in spite of everything, had the inner strength to forsake everything. Here is Amrapali who's being offered a queenship on a platter and has the inner strength to say no to it and forsake it. And then has a discussion. Now here I'm talking about the discussion with Bodh. When you read different texts and different, one has to sort of read between the lines. And sometimes you read correctly between the lines, sometimes you read incorrectly. So let me also put it this way. But in short, that when she's asked, her Tark with Tark, her dialogue with Bodh, I think for me was very fascinating and interesting. That was at one level. That was, of course, after he had become Bodh.
Yes.
But Bodh Gaya, when you're thinking of that moment, और सुजाता है, मैंने तो सुजाता जी को बहुत किया हुआ है, आम्रपाली को बहुत नृत्य में किया है, बट फॉर मी दैट इज़ अ वेरी डिफाइनिंग मोमेंट. आप सिद्धार्थ, मैं अब उनको सिद्धार्थ के ही नाम से कह रही हूँ, सिद्धार्थ आगे पीछे कर रहे अपने मेडिटेट कर रहे, तो जो हमारे यहाँ योग की तपस्या के बारे में कह रहे हैं कि आप जो है समाधि की ओर. अब समाधि का क्या मतलब है? Samadhi doesn't mean that you only leave your sharir and go off.
That's right.
But it also means when you become one, that enlightenment, that kundalini jagran jab ho jati hai, complete, that is also in a way akin to a state of samadhi when you forget your own inner self and become one with what you're seeking. And so for me, कि जब उन्होंने सुना कि he tried his best not eating and this and that. लेकिन किसी म्यूजिशियन का सुना कि कोई म्यूजिशियन कह रहे हैं कि आप अपने शागिर्द से कह रहे हैं. Now again, these are different tales and different versions. So कह रहे हैं कि that when तार को, do not tighten the string of your instrument so hard, so tight that it breaks. And nor keep it so loose that it becomes besura, atonal. So what it means is talking about that it has to be just right. Just right. And that is also what you're talking in science. That when scientifically also, when you see that when the two resonance of the two vibrations match, and it suddenly peaks up and then it breaks.
That's right.
So that's exactly what he was. So from there onwards, then he realized that, the Madhyama part, the middle path, that for me is a very, very beautiful, personally speaking, a beautiful moment of enlightenment. In other words, you will always have coexistence of opposites.
That's right.
You will always have. Now, even at one point of time in your Prajna Yatra Sutra, it is said that form is emptiness and emptiness is form.
Yes.
Form and emptiness are two, sides of the same thing. In other words, it's said, of course, it's said it in a better way. But emptiness also gives form the space. Without emptiness, there can be no form, and without form. And that reminds me of our Vedic shloka also, exact parallel. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate, Purnasya Purnamadaye, Purnameva Vashishyate. That a circle is complete by itself, a whole by itself. That whole is a whole, but yet it is empty.
Yes.
And within it, it's everything. Within it are all emotions, and yet you have to, when you empty it out, it's still complete. So there's emptiness either way. And I think that, so many different philosophies in that particular moment was defined, and those principles and philosophies or whatever, I think those are the intangibles, but it is a very, very defining moment. For another defining moment, that he is coming and he's going away, Sujata is coming and offers him key. Why did he accept it from her? After all, so why not? He could have. After all, she was not of a princely clan. She was not of royal blood. She was not of his stature, and yet he does. Of course, the way, I mean, some of his deeds in acceptance of people as they are, in whatever station they might be, in whatever, I think that somehow the other also did not, at that point of time, was not understood by some of his friends of that time.
Yes, that's
Of
right.
that time. And so, but which they later realized. But I think that is also another aspect, that you cannot, that you have to accept people, see the goodness in them, see their devotion in them, see what makes them, and rather than only, because it's easy to see the other side, but so I think for me, and that those aspects, there's so many different, but basically all the philosophical thoughts, I think, of his, which he later I think in those months of his meditation over there, months and months of introspection, I think the germination happened at that point of time. And therefore, for me, Bodh Gaya is extremely an important fertile ground for, as far as Buddhist philosophy is concerned. Later on, he went and spread his message around. But there were so many things. And now, even at different points of life, at points in life, I mean, look at the kind of, in simple terms, suppose somebody had to explain it to me and I'm so agitated, I cannot understand it. How, in simple terms, he actually realizing my state of mind, or her state of mind, or his state of mind, that at that point you cannot make him see reason or her reason.
Yes.
Because it is, and yet, how to make that person accept the inevitable.
That's so true.
That is
Yeah.
amazing, because
powerful.
that is powerful. That is power, and that is also comes through very clearly. First of all, this whole thing about acceptance of people, and that starvation is not the only way, or just X and Y is not the only way. Even when in his interaction with Amrapali, that about admitting women into the Sangha, which had earlier been, sort of, in a way, particularly by Anand and others, were not too much in favor of
Yes,
it.
that's right.
But how his being able to see that it is somewhere, if you have that inner strength, the whole thing question is, temptations are all over. Temptations are within the mind. And then he's talking about the mind. The whole time he's talking about mind is where this. So after he says our mind brings in the desires, and therefore the imbalance within yourself. And if you empty yourself of those desires, you have to address the mind, and therefore you are sort of getting into that state of sublimation
Yes.
of inner harmony and happiness. And then nothing touches you. You're there, but yet you're not there. But it doesn't mean that you're not doing your duty. You're doing your duty, you're there, but yet you're not there. Because there's so much of, you're risen above it. You have risen above it. And therefore, so I think there's a lot to Buddha's philosophy that one can, but the point is that he has shown you the path, he has shown you the door, he has lighted the way. It's up to each one of us. Can we
That's so
really
right.
understand it?
Yes.
Even one statement of his, how much are we able to understand it? That lies in our hand. Whether if we are able to understand it, I think we'll benefit. If we are unable to understand, say, hey, come on, but he did not realize it because he was not in that position, or he did not, or he, whatever. You can always, criticism is nothing, but in other words, you have not understood it.
That's so right.
And so I think, so you asked about why Bodh Gaya and appeals to me. Why? So not only Bodh Gaya, Vaishali also appeals to me.
So
And
these are such profound remarks, opening remarks as we requested. So right from the concepts of shunyata to purnata, you have covered everything so beautifully.
because it's emptiness of desires, he's
Yeah.
talking about shunyata the whole time. And आपने उसमें देखा, I mean, that time he was not alive. This happened centuries after his death. But even when, and particularly I'm talking about the region of that state of Bodh Gaya and Vaishali,
Vaishali.
which is Bihar, where you had Samrat Ashok, Emperor Ashok, and his lust for power, that he has to rule. Everything that he says is to be done. Whatever he has to conquer, that for him, it was a vision of
Chakravarti.
that is a large empire, a universal empire, whatever. And he went around. So in that whole thing was bloodshed everywhere.
Yes.
And he couldn't care less about the blood being spilled, because that was his goal, to gain power over his supremacy and establish his supremacy everywhere. But somewhere that point comes when he says, I still remember when at one point, and that also I've this thing, and of course my visual representation was that there are corpses all over, all corpses all over.
Wow.
And wailing women, wailing, the left, the few surviving people wailing and shrouding all those corpses with white shrouds. And then some of them look at him in such utter disdain and disgust. And they throw this white sheets on him, and he's completely submerged in it.
Oh my God.
Completely. So visually, that in other words, you had become devoid of sensitivity. What is a corpse? Corpse doesn't have feeling.
That's so right.
There's no life. And so there's no life at all. There's devoid of sensitivity, devoid of feelings, devoid of compassion, devoid of humanism, devoid of anything.
Life itself.
Life itself. And so that visual representation that the women were doing, and those few surviving members, that you are like that corpse, a living, walking corpse, with devoid of any feeling for life or humanity or compassion. And then he sort of slowly emerges, and then he suddenly hears Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, and he realizes, I really have to empty myself of this, this kind of a lust he had for power, his ego, his pride, that only what I say is right and what is this thing, and that what I want has to be done. So that, I think, and then it was that turning point when he turns towards Buddhism. So I
from
think
Chanda
that is
Shok to Dharma Shok.
So, yes. And that's what made him Amar.
Yes.
That made him, we remember him. Had he not
That's so true.
undergone this transformation, we would have remembered him and he would have been example in a different way.
That's so true.
People would have talked, but in a very different manner. But now to Dhamma Ashok, you talk about him
With reverence.
With reverence.
Yes, that's so true.
So what is important is that how much are you able to serve people, humanity? It is not necessary that, when we are talking that you're above everything, you empty yourself of it. But yet you're doing your duty, कर्म आप कर रहे हैं, of serving humanity. So I think some of them are very, very powerful messages of Buddha. I mean, I can just go on and on, some lines here from this, from that, keeps flitting, and then one can go
I think
on and on.
this is the entire purpose of this conversation. It's so enriching. Thank you so much. And the visual imagery you were talking about, it is so powerful that one is like having been enshrouded in white by those people. It's very touching.
Because they leave, and
yes.
then there is a song, अकेला खड़ा हूँ मैं इस रणभूमि में, something हम तो something सम्राट बन कलेंगे पर कोई नहीं है मेरे पास. I am alone. I am at the peak, but I am alone. कोई नहीं मेरे पास, सिर्फ रुधिर और सिर्फ something or रुधिर और बहती लाश. So which means only this flowing blood, streams of blood
and corpses.
And corpses, that's all. And I'm the Samrat, I am the emperor.
So again, this highlights the concepts, the twin concepts, should we say, of the Shunyata and Purnata.
Exactly.
So beautiful.
So it just highlights the two.
Yeah.
That there is it and there's no. There, not there.
Wow.
So, and even in Kisa, when I think of
Yes.
Kisa, it's beautiful. Yes.
I was about to reach there.
I think it's so beautiful. How we are all so scared of death. Each and
Yes.
everyone. Look at the pandemic around.
Yes.
In a way, there's this fear of death. It's why? Fear of contagious, but fear of death, which is paramount. So this, but death has to come. Birth is an accident, but death is a certainty. The question is how and when. That is different. So I think that acceptance of the inevitability of death happening to each and every person, big, small, king or beggar or whoever, has to be accepted by one and all. And I think Kisa's story is very beautiful, very beautiful. That whole episode.
Yes, it's outstanding.
It's outstanding because I don't know.
It's I think it should come on record.
It should that here was Kisa, whose little child has suddenly died. A child, I mean, her one and only child has died. And she's mad with grief. I mean, she's pained, she's agonized, she doesn't know, she's distraught. And she's running hither and thither that please bring my child back to life. It can't be he oblique she, whatever. I don't remember whether the child was a he or a she. But has to be brought back to life, And somebody said, oh, there's this saintly person, so go to him, because nobody could make her see sense. Because she was so distraught, she just wasn't able to see sense. And then she runs to Bodh and says, please, you have to. I heard you can do miracles and do that. And so obviously he knew that at that point of time, to try and make her understand is futile. So he says, okay, go to any house and get me a handful of mustard seeds where no death has occurred. And so she said, yes, she thought it's going to be child's play. And she went, lo and behold,
I
she
think
finally
that's-
understood what he wanted to tell
Yes,
her.
such a powerful message delivered so simply
So simply.
and
Exactly.
experientially.
Exactly.
That you go and experience
Yeah.
by yourself that this is going to happen and this is written on the wall.
Yeah.
As soon as you happen in the world,
Yeah.
it will happen to you.
Absolutely.
So I think there was no better way of making Kisa and all of us understand
Yes.
the inevitability.
That
of
inevitably
death.
of death, and that we should accept it. Yes, we don't know when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to come, but
It is there. So beautiful.
I think there's so much depth in little incidents that his experiences. Number one, number two, what he has just said. Every now and then he said.
That's so true. Why don't we go back a step? And because you have also done a lot of work on his wife.
Yes, Yashodhara. A lot. I
Yes.
love her. I love her.
So why don't we talk about her?
Now, here is an incident. Now, this is seen from one perspective,
Hmm.
perhaps from a gender perspective and of a wife, etc. He may not have been correct.
Yes.
But seen from another perspective, he was correct. So, how is it? But then, I think and particularly that whole, I couldn't find a better expression of the feelings of Yashodhara than has been penned by Maithili
Sharon
Sharan.
Gupt.
It was amazing,
Yes.
as though he has gone into the inner recesses of that woman's mind.
That's so true.
It's beautiful. Even when she's trying to, so here is a woman, and I cry when I was reading it. My mother had first told me, then she said, "Beta padho." So I sat and read it. Actually, all my forays into Hindi literature and all the various things was because of as I told you,
Yes.
I told right in the beginning, that the whole atmosphere was given by, and inspiration and motivation was my mother. Courtesy her. And so she said, read it. And so when I read it, when I came to this bit, I started crying like this. And I was not married at that time. I hadn't had a son or anything. So, I mean, okay, yet it hit me here. And I was crying. I could feel with her. And says, Sakhi, ve mujhse kehkar jaate. And I'm jumping. I'm jumping in between because सखी वे मुझसे कहकर जाते सिद्ध हेतु स्वामी गए ये गौरव की बात पर चोरी चोरी गए यही बड़ा व्याघात सखी वे मुझसे कहकर जाते. My friend, why didn't he tell me before going? So, when I see it from her perspective,
She has been deceived.
yeah, she's been there. That here she's sleeping, and then
The
suddenly
child is
she
there.
wakes up, and then she finds that she has been deserted by her husband.
Such a shock.
Such a shock. I mean, okay, he went for meditation, and then she says, स्वयं सुसज्जित करके क्षण में प्रियतम को प्राणों में भर में हमें भेजती रण में छात्र धर्म के नाते सखी में मुझसे कहकर जाते. Then she's saying that after all, I'm the wife of a Kshatriya clan. So as a Kshatriya wife, and as in our four dharmas, we know that they are the ones who are the protectors, So as a Kshatriya wife, it is my dharma to send the menfolk to the battlefield. And the sense is, we do not know whether he'll return. whoever it is, could be the father, could be the husband, could be the brother, could be the son. We do not know whether he'll return alive or not. He says, if I, as a Kshatriya woman, can do that as my duty, do you think I would have been an obstacle and I would have not allowed to
Stopped
go in
him?
for medicine? Stopped him? No, I would have allowed him. So why couldn't he confide? Her whole pain was that he had not confided in her. He did not forewarn her that he. So I could empathize with her. And then later on also, when he comes back, she's amazingly, I mean, anybody would be happy.
So
Finally. He's come back as Buddha. But still, but he comes and he says, I'm a bhikshu.
Yeah.
I'm the guy.
Bhiksha
I'm asking
Dehi.
for bhiksha. So imagine here, the thing, she's come back and suddenly she says, here's just a bhikshuk asking for bhiksha. Again, just imagine the conflicting emotions, of that time. So I think it's a very powerful poetry, very powerful. Actually, it's more than a poetry, small
Yes.
poetry. It's a, they say. And understanding the inner recesses and yet understanding her understanding of his situation and his compulsion, his desire to, devote his life in the cause of humanity, and her acceptance. Because she accepts it also.
She accepts it.
Acceptance. And then she being able to even donate that little son of hers into the
Order.
Sangha. Yes, into order. So that is, I think, speaks volumes for the strength of both.
That's so true.
Inner strength. Her inner strength is amazing. First, not only as a Kshatriya woman, but in her acceptance. And then imagine which mother is going to willingly give away the child. I mean, it's difficult.
It's very powerful.
It's very, very powerful. So I think there are two characters, two very strong characters. Yes, at some point of time, neither of them understood each other, and yet they understood each other. So here again, for a moment, he also did not understand that she would be able to understand and let him go.
Yes.
She did not understand why couldn't he confide in her, and yet they understood. Because he was confident that she will understand, but
will take
not in
time.
that instant.
That will take time.
Not in that instant. It comes later. For that her also, not in that instance, but it comes later. So I think it's again a beautiful story about how two strong people had their moments of not being able to understand each other. I mean, it was nothing that they felt that it was against the other, but nothing like that. And yet, in that split of a second, you take a decision, but then you later on, both of them understand why it was done. So that acceptance with a grace, with the heart, I think speaks volumes for the character of both persons.
That's so right.
Both persons, amazing character. I also love it, when she's telling Rahul about he keeps asking, who's my father, and how she talks about the hunter. And, that's very beautiful. So that's how she's explaining, and which again shows how much she has accepted it.
She has imbibed it.
She's imbibed it, she's understood, and she's totally with him.
Yes.
She's with him in his journey, even being away.
Yes.
There is support for him and his work, and there's a certain sense of pride in his work.
Definitely. Definitely. It shines through.
It shines through.
Yes. Coming one more step back.
Yes. Yes,
About
I'm going a step back.
His mother.
His mother. I think again.
Maya Devi.
Yeah, Maya Devi. Mother died
Yes.
when he was a baby, not childbirth virtually. But the foster mother, his Mausi who brought him up.
And then later she becomes the
Then she becomes a bhikkhuni.
Bhikkhuni.
So she becomes a bhikkhuni, Amrapali, but Amrapali has a tark vitark, the dialogue with him before. I don't know at what point of time he finally decides to open the doors of the Sangha. Because Maya Devi was one of the first ones to become the bhikkhunis. But this dialogue with Amrapali is equally very, very important.
It's like a milestone in his journey.
Yes, it is a milestone. Because her arguments, her reasoning, not her arguments, I would say her reasoning, her philosophy, she had seen her life. She had seen everything. So actually when you've seen everything, but yet in spite of being able to get everything, she was
ready to move on.
Yes, she was a yogini from inside. In spite of being, after all, she was being offered the queenship and everything, and yet, so that whole thing that she was able to rise above the mundane world, materialistic desires of the world.
Yeah.
So that means she had emptied herself. That is, she was in that process, or in the process. She had not yet emptied, but in the process of emptying herself of all her desires.
That's so true.
So there, and then of course Maya Devi also. Then later on Yashodhara also enters.
It's a fascinating journey.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey. Very fascinating. It's a beautiful. I mean, from the psychological point of view. Now, keeping away from the philosophical angle, even as a study in psychology of Buddha and of all the associated characters around him is very interesting. Even Anand is a very interesting, fascinating person to study.
And the whole miracle thing.
Yes, exactly.
Why did you show the miracle? It was not supposed to be.
I know. I was discussing with some of my colleagues and artists at that point of time and we were discussing that here Sujata, she also had a desire because she was told her desires will be fulfilled. There is this great person, Sadhu Baba, and go and pray to him, your wishes will be fulfilled, etc. So फिर वो जाती हैं, and so every day, and besides that, as is there in the country life, Atithi Satkar, here is a person meditating, so one is of Atithi Satkar and one is of getting your desire to get your wishes fulfilled. But here it is, and I feel from her point of view, that and with that we all discussed when we were listening, that what could it be when she comes and she sees that every day everything that she has laid out is untouched, nothing is touched, and then one day, fine day, the gentleman is not there, he's moved away and he's going. So what would be the first feeling of anybody? That you are, are you slighting me? What is it about me? That would be a normal human reaction. That would be a human reaction. That what is it that will be slighted? That am I? Now, unfortunately, I couldn't find any poetry. So then suddenly one gentleman wrote a poetry because that was his thought process, and which I sort of gelled with me. Of course, I didn't like one or two things here and there. That was different. And so this poetry this poetry resonated with me and with a lot of us when we were working on it. And that when so her first thing is that, is it because of my station? He obviously looks to come from a very high station. Saumya Sarup, Sadhya Sarup, Jogi bhes mein, that way. And he says, and why ye aapne tiraskar kyun kiya? That way, why have you refused anything from my hands? Their refusal can come from, because I may be a woman. You don't take it from a woman. But another point of refusal could be that I do not come from the same jati as you. So obviously you feel that I've come from a lower jati, lower, lower station in life, lower caste, a woman, gender. So there could be so many things, issues.
Factors, yeah.
So which is the normal feeling of a normal human being. And that would be the first thing, that her sense of rejection. Why? And so, and at that point so that was a beautiful, powerful piece of poetry that was written by this gentleman. And so then, so giving all these, again from so many perspectives, as seen, which would be common or as our reaction, common man's reaction. And then here's this thing, that it is nothing. I've just heard this. It is nothing. Nobody's higher or lower station in life. It is their karma which makes them. Their intentions which makes them. They're this thing, and what you want to do. So your desire was only to please. So fine. That was okay. You were serving with your full devotion and heart. And which is the most beautiful, to serve humanity.
That's so true.
And for all these months you've been serving with full devotion and heart. So, and it is that humanity you're serving, you were not serving finally. In the beginning you may have had a desire that your wishes may be granted, but not after so many, a lapse of such a long time.
Ma'am, this part of the story is very intriguing. That's how I kind of requested you to reflect. Because I was working at Bodh Gaya for almost 2 years. And there are two very different literature on this. In fact, compared to Amrapali, the Mausi and the wife, you have a number of literature, and sourcing them is not a problem. But the literature on Sujata is really scant. And if you go a little deeper, you realize that there are two contradictory versions of her relationship with Buddha during that period. One version is that Buddha actually fell in love with her. And there is a story about she having a baby and walking away with the baby. And he feeling completely distraught because, like a forlorn lover, because she has gone away. And he is left with a bowl in which she was always offering kheer. She was a golem. She was a daughter of the rich milkman of the village, 300 cows. And what best she could offer was the kheer that should bring every day. So end of the day, end of the relationship, he was left with a bowl. So disturbed he was that he walks with this ball onto Narayan river, and even now there is very less water in the river, that. So he walks and he follows that ball, reaches a point where this small guy with a uski chatai gives him that gift, and the Bodhi tree which you see today actually was at the bank. The river has changed its course. At that time it was the bank. And there he decides that I will have the answer, final answer here. He sits there and rests his history. So the point this school was trying to raise, that it was the most positive force of love, emotions of love, which transformed him completely and took him, and which finally culminated in his journey from one to all.
Lovely, beautiful. I'd never read this. I had not.
This is a very interesting, and the other conservative Buddhist literature that you get, they try to gloss this over.
In fact, the conservative literature tries to gloss over many of the women,
Exactly.
all the women, in
Exactly.
fact.
This part is very not quite researched
Yeah.
part,
Yeah.
which I was interested to.
No, in fact, thank you for introducing me to it. I would like to do more research on it because it's a fascinating story. Because this again opens up the portals to another direction of a study of human psychology and relationships.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. In fact, when you're talking about love and, which talks about the concept of, in a way, the another path. In a way, you can see later on, the same thought translates itself into the Vaishnav thought
Exactly.
of Krishna Radha,
Exactly.
symbolisms. Okay, Atma and Paramatma. So that is also the same thought. So very beautiful. In fact, I had not heard this story. Thank you for introducing me to it. I'll definitely try and read up more on it and try to find more on it. Excellent, beautiful.
Because this relationship, you would have realized, is very different from his relationship with his Mausi,
Very
with
different.
his wife,
Yes.
including Amrapali.
Amrapali. Amrapali
None
was
of the
at,
three.
at the same level.
But then this lady,
Huh.
Sujata, enjoys a completely a relationship of equality. The way she addresses him in the beginning, and gradually, naturally, she develops a respect, because being an intelligent lady, she's able to size up that he's not an ordinary guy. But yet, she has a very sakha kind of communication. Compared to her, none of these three ladies enjoy that kind of
No,
free and flow of,
no. Because out of the other three, other three,
yeah,
the one who can, who sort of has a discourse with him on equal level is Amrapali.
Exactly.
But that too, there's a distance.
Exactly.
There's a certain distance maintained. Yashodhara has never had this kind of a, nor has his foster mother. On Sujata, very interesting. I was not aware of it, and beautiful, beautiful story. It throws a completely different light on even the enlightenment process of Buddha, because even on this conventional side, very few people know about the musician and the thread, the musical string. Very
That's
few
right.
people know. So that is one, but that is also not part of the very conservative thought. So that is also away from that, a little outside the realm of the very, very conservative thought. And here all. And this is completely different. So
So these are
it's
three
very
layers
interesting.
now.
Thank you. Very
Thank you.
good.
Thank you
Very
for
good.
bringing it in.
Lovely.
Ma'am, how do you look at Yashodhara through the lens of modernity? Is it possible to look at her as a woman through the lens of modernity?
Yes, I would say so. Any woman, even a modern woman, is a woman after all. She has her emotions. However, you may call her Yashodhara, you may call her whatever, by any the so-called modern names or etc. But emotions don't change. The feeling of betrayal will not change. That feeling, except that this one says a modern woman, now it depends again, a modern woman. There are two different types. One modern woman can say,
go to hell.
go to hell. And this and that. I am doing my own work. I couldn't care less. The other one would say, I'll teach him a lesson. I will teach him a lesson. Then there's a third one saying, okay, live and let live, forget him. So now, even in the modern women, when you're talking about modern women, look at the papers are full of it, incidents are all around. You have three kinds. So, and there will be, and there's a fourth kind. Even amongst the modern women, the so-called modern. And let me say, I will not say modern in terms of mindset, but they're living in contemporary age. Now, these are two different things. So she'll still be pining, and she'll say, "What happened?" and this and that. So we have these pockets of women and these levels. Who knows? It was not there at that time. I think even society must have had all these 4 levels of women even at that time,
Definitely.
as it is today. Circumstances change, incidents might change, but in a sense, while they are changing, there's a constancy in that change because the incidents remain. The essence of those incidents, the sense of betrayal, the essence of being hurt, the sense of yes, are you going to donate your son to monkhood? If I see the cases around, there are many instances where women fight for their right, they will not part with their children. That's why that any woman is loath to part with a child, that way, because it's part. So, but yet, sometimes you do find cases, my sister is a lawyer over here sitting, you do hear of cases where women are wanting their own personal freedom and happy to give away the child. That somebody else takes care of the child, etc., because they want their own personal freedom. You have. So now, this I'm saying that about her giving her child into monkhood. Was it done of her own violation, or was she forced to do it?
Brute force.
Huh?
Brute force.
Yes. And?
Oh, he's saying who
Who's-
would force?
Who would force?
her?
Well, circumstances, family, whatever.
But that happened even during the rise of Sikhism. Every family was parting.
Yes,
If you
exactly.
look at Bihar School of Yoga, for example.
Yes,
We heard of a story of this Niranjananji.
absolutely.
Niranjananji was in Raipur, somewhere near Raipur, sir, and they could foresee the child is born.
Yeah,
Who would be the successor of Satyananji. So the whole team went there and the whole house started reacting
yeah,
at why they have come to pick up the child.
yeah,
They didn't, so they left their address. That, look, this is the address of the ashram. In case at some stage you feel that the boy can be parted with,
Yeah.
do let us know.
yeah,
So within a year they could sense that this guy is incorrigible
Yeah.
kind.
yeah,
They can't handle him. So actually they found out this who gave ashram, went there, handed over.
handed over the child.
He
Exactly, I've
became
heard of
Narayan.
that. Yes,
Narayanji is the chief
yeah,
of that
yeah,
way. So there are instances even after.
yes. Even after so we do not know exactly. Nobody knows exactly what happened in
happened?
Bodh's life, whether she did it of her own violation or were there indirectly an atmosphere around
She was
or
coerced to
whatever
do
which
it.
overpowered her. We do not know. We can only speculate after a gap of 2,600 years. So so 2,400 years or whatever. So, huh?
600 is the correct.
Okay, 600 years, exactly. So we can only speculate. Again, remember, all our speculation is coming from the point of view of our experience and thoughts as we stand at that particular point of time. So even those people before us who have written commentaries, say in the last century or 10 centuries ago, the society of that time was very different. And so you are living in the society of that time and then writing your commentary and your thoughts. Today's society is different. And yet, even in this society, I could write a commentary because I come from a different thought process.
That's so true.
This one, just next to me, another lady would write a commentary but it will be completely at variance with mine. Living in the same contemporary time, but her thought process is different. And similarly, the next one, the next one, the next one. So I think it also depends on individuals, their perception, and circumstances around. And I cannot say and I think none of us can say this thing that this is it, this is it. Yes, the only thing we can say, this is it. Truth is truth. Satya is satya. Asatya is asatya. Untruth is untruth. Those some basic values is, yes. But the rest of it is, they are variable commodities and they are variable entities. Their permutation, combination, how it affects people and their actions and their mindset is very different.
That is so true.
I mean, look at so many people. जो अभी flood वड होता है, बाढ़ होता है, सुनामी हुआ, फलाना हुआ, ठिकाना हुआ. You will find many people रो रहे. अरे pandemic ही ले लीजिए. Why go back to this thing? There's so depression. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with it. I think क्या हुआ? आपको ठीक है. I'm dealing with it. Okay, let me think. Okay, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to read. Let me start learning how to read. Somebody says, no, I'm going to do this. I'll find my ways of expression. I mean, this pandemic has shown how in the same family, different people have dealt with that lockdown situation.
Yes.
In the same family.
That's so true.
Living in the same household.
So, just to supplement what she was saying, in management they teach us that there is a room and there is a guy stuck in the room. There is a telephone, and then suddenly the room is aflame. It is in flames. So what does he do? There can be so many endless reactions to the situation. He can pick up the phone and call the fire brigade. He can just duck down under a table to save himself. Yet, if you are judging that person, I think we would not be in a position to do that because all the reactions are right. It's because of that individual and his knowledge or his perception of reality and his own way of dealing with things will articulate that particular reaction at that moment of time. So all the reactions are correct. So you have to deal with people in that manner. So
when closer to our time, in our age, you have one son not agreeing with how the father went and started fighting for freedom movement. Gandhi and his eldest son. They did not see eye to eye. So you have it in the same family, same this thing, but how father is dealing with a certain situation, others are okay with it, but one particular person in that same family is not okay with it.
yes.
So, we have it. We have all kinds within the same family. And I said, pandemic situation is really a good example of how different people, different members of one single family
React.
react to this whole thing.
That's
and
so
have
true.
Actually.
And all of them are right.
Uh-huh.
All of them are right.
And all of them are right in their own, because it's their own mental
way.
state.
Yeah.
You can say they are not right if they work themselves into such a depression. You say, okay, there are avenues. Well, I would just say that Bodh, his life, I think there have been so many incidents. It is for each one of us to understand the importance of each of those incidents and draw our own thing and see how we react to it, and not judge him by what X has written or Y has written.
Absolutely.
And some way, personally, I feel that there are nuggets, beautiful gold nuggets lying over there of philosophical thought in his actions, in his now. But what I have said earlier is that the basic things which is unchangeable is the path of duty, of righteousness, of honesty, etc. Those values never change. Externals change, and the same person can change. Today he could react to a particular, or he oblique she
Yes.
could react to a particular situation in a certain way. 2 days later, he might react to a similar kind of situation in a different way.
Very different way.
So I think what finally is that the more moh and maya we are gripped with, desires we are gripped with, the more attachment is there, the more we are going to work ourselves into misery and agony. Those are the points, which really, and the more we free ourselves of it,
The lighter we are.
the lighter we are.
so
Mentally
true.
lighter and so emotionally lighter. But it doesn't mean that we don't love people, that nobody's
Yes.
there. Everybody's there, but we are still doing our duty, and yet not allowing circumstances and thoughts and negativity to overwhelm the individual. And that's, I think, all the great saints, everyone, all the great sages have talked of the same thing in different ways, in different manner.
That's so true. It has been lovely and very enriching talking to you,
Thank you so much.
and a real pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaste.
Thank you.